Hello and welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethany.
And we are the Youngs. Hey, thanks everybody for joining us again this week. We are excited about starting a brand new series today, and it's one that is different than any we've done so far.
True.
And we're looking forward to these next couple of weeks, maybe even 3, maybe 4 on these. It's going to be...
Depending on how chatty we get.
Yes, I suppose so. And hey, just a reminder, if it's been a while since you've checked out our itinerary, evangelistdaveyoung.com, you can find it there. Check it out for this summer. I know many of you will be traveling, and we have a ton of meetings this summer, and so we may be near you, and we'd love to have you join us for one of our services and at least say hello and reach out to us. We just would be really thrilled and honored about that. And then I also wanted to remind you to check out our keepingityoungpodcast.com webpage. And several reasons for that. One is right at the top, you'll find just an easy link. You double click on that link at the top. It'll take you right to the information, sign up, and registration page for the Keeping It Young and the Couples Prayer Advance Couples Retreat.
Yes.
And so that was a mouthful, wasn't it?
It was.
And so we still would hope many of you will consider joining us there. We still have some spaces available.
Yes.
And we want you probably need to make that decision fairly soon and start planning your trip and your housing and all of that.
Yes.
So look forward to that. You'll find that at the top. And then there's also, I know you've heard us say this, but if you're new to the podcast, you may have missed it. Down in the lower right-hand corner of the homepage at the keepingityoungpodcast.com is a little microphone. And one of the easiest ways to send us a message is to double-click on that microphone, record it in your own voice, and hit send, and it will be emailed to us. And we love to hear your voice, and we can reply then to you in an email.
Yes.
And that's a very easy way to reach out. So if you just, maybe in the middle of one of our podcasts, you think of something, just, run over to that website and send us a quick message. And we'll do our very best. As far as I know, we've answered every message we've ever received.
We try.
And I don't know of any that we've missed. And so we certainly try to do that. At the bottom, you'll find the contact us as well. So you can send us a message there. And right now, there's 105 different podcast episodes on our webpage.
Wow.
And so you can go through series on communication, on raising children, handling our hindrances.
Right.
There is a ton of information there. So hope you'll take advantage of it.
Absolutely. I know sometimes we meet people on the road and they'll say, I'm not quite caught up to where you guys are in your episodes with the podcast. And that never bothers us, because there are many series, there are many that stand alone. You can go back and listen. And we never expect that people are going to listen every week to the, exactly every Monday. But so we would love for you just to listen as you can.
All right. Are we ready to get started?
Absolutely.
Let's jump into this series. We're calling it Thoughts for Our Single Friends. And we're really just going to answer 4 or 5 different questions, I guess it is, and look through these just one question at a time, and the answers can be fairly detailed. So let's get started. What's the first question for our Single Friends podcast?
This one's a loaded one. How do you make singleness something very good?
Hey, now that's great. And there's no, just to begin that one, we're not thinking at all that, oh my goodness, some of you are thinking singleness is horrible, because some of you are single and very happy.
Yes.
And we're aware of that. But we do believe that God Almighty, His plan for our lives is that every stage of our life is something good.
Yes.
That's God's plan. He does delight in giving us the desires of our heart. He does delight in blessing our lives. And it is true that His will is good, acceptable, and perfect.
Right.
And He wants us to prove that as true.
Yes.
And so when we ask that question, how do you make singleness something very good? We're really just going to take some time here to encourage you that are single on steps you can take that your singleness is spiritually profitable and valuable and in a time of growth and just in every way very, very positive.
Yes.
And so here's a few answers for you. And one of the first things I would say is you that are single, you have to make this a time of spiritual ministry. Don't miss that as a single.
Right.
It's a time to be completely committed to God.
Yes.
And I think most of you are, but if you're not, you can evaluate that. Or if you're not sure, how am I doing there? Ask yourself questions like these. Are you seeking first the kingdom of God and His righteousness? Are you denying yourself, taking up your cross and following Christ? 1 Corinthians 7, Paul talks in some very frank ways about what it means to be married. We've dealt with the first few verses several times on the podcast.
True.
But he also addresses singles there and mentions that in the culture there in Corinth, singleness was a very valid, very, very spiritually valid way to live a life, being single.
Yes.
And so you just make it a time of spiritual ministry by being completely committed to Christ and being completely committed to serving Christ. And here's how you do that practically. You have to be completely committed to serving in the church. Now let's talk about that. Completely committed to serving in the church. What advice would you give singles about that?
Well, I would, just from observation or maybe even some conversations that I've had with single ladies and maybe even some gentlemen across the United States, I know that this is a time where they are either in school, they're still in their college years, so they are very busy with school, or they're just stepping out into what a lot of our young friends called the adulting years, and they're just navigating having their first apartment, they're navigating their first full-time job, they're navigating maybe their first time steps in their career that they feel that the Lord wants them to pursue.
Budgeting.
They're budgeting, they're doing all kinds of things for the first time. And all of that can feel very overwhelming. And I get that. I do. There are times in our life, we've been married almost 29 years, and life just can be overwhelming at times. But because of that, they feel like they just don't have time to completely give themselves over to a ministry. You know, maybe they can, I'll help out here and there, but to sign up to, I am going to, let's say, work in junior church every week. You know, they're like, oh boy, that's a lot. Every week? I don't know that I could do it every week. Or I'm going to help out in our Reformers Unanimous program every Friday night. Give up my Friday night? Why would I give up my Friday night? That I finally get off work and I just want to relax. And so sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming, I think, to our single friends to do the adulting things along with the serving the Lord things. But really, you do have the time to do it. If you will just discipline yourself or disciple yourself into saying, you know what, I work every day from this time to this time, and I can certainly give up some time on Saturday to study for a lesson that I teach children every Sunday morning or whatever that may be.
Sure. That's really good. And just in a practical way, I would also suggest to you to be early. Work at being early to church, and by being early, be involved. Don't just come and sit, with maybe another single and just sit there. There's widows in the church or widowers. Yes. There's older people. There's families. There's boys and girls.
Right.
And you would be surprised, single friends, how much of a blessing you would be to others if you were early enough to greet people, to shake their hand.
Right. Don't wait for others to come to you. I know a lot of times in your singleness, you're just like, well, that's a family, that's a married couple, that's a widow. She's been through a whole lot and I have nothing to offer her. And so you just wait for people to come to you. Don't wait for them to come to you. Come early, as David said, and you go, you greet, you say hello, you get to know people, and you might be surprised at the friendships you'll develop.
And sometimes when you're early and you try to get to know people, people can be cold. But you don't let that stop you just because one person is cold. Some people just have the personality. They don't want to talk to anybody, and you just smile and wave and move on.
Right.
Be an avid participant in your church. Serve in the choir. Some of you can sing well, and be at every practice and be a positive influence.
Yes.
Serve in Sunday school. Most churches we go to are looking for people who can be depended on to teach Sunday school, to influence young lives, and to have a part. You can serve in junior church. I know many churches we go to need junior church workers, and it is a heavy responsibility in the sense that there's a cost involved, because then you can miss church with some of your friends because you're serving. But you can also have an amazing and phenomenal influence in a lot of young people's lives if you're willing to teach a lesson in Sunday school or lead, in junior church, or lead in that service. And like in our church, we have 2 services.
Yes.
So, you could legitimately serve in one junior church in one service and then go to the other service as worship.
Well, and I was even going to say that I know that that can be like a negative thing. People can say, well, I need that spiritual food on Sunday morning. I don't want to miss the Sunday morning service so that I'm serving with children. But in our technology, you can certainly miss the Sunday morning service, and you could go home Sunday afternoon and listen to it or even watch the live
Absolutely.
stream. So,
And this is just another practical. Sometimes churches will have meals where, people bring food into the meal.
yes.
And even if you're single, be an avid participant.
Right.
Cook spaghetti or pick up a, fried chicken or
Yes.
make cornbread or make a dessert.
Make cornbread.
And I like cornbread.
David's
so
hungry.
Make cornbread. And I would add to that, be completely committed to serving the church family. Develop friendships and
Yes.
even with families, and be a blessing to them.
Yes.
You could really get to know a family, and their children could trust you, and you could have an influence in their children. You could even perhaps help babysit once a month so that the parents, especially if they have younger children.
True.
And the blessing you can be in your single years is really phenomenal if you'll just work at it. And don't miss this as well. Jesus ate with sinners and publicans all the time. And he ate with his disciples all the time. And there's just something special about taking the time to be with people over food.
Right.
And so, some of you have an apartment or a home. Have you considered opening your home, inviting others to your home for a meal?
True.
Maybe a married couple, a young married couple, or maybe two other single friends.
Yes.
Just open your home and serve. And you not only make it, the question is, how do you make singleness something very good? And we would also add to that, it's not just a time for spirituality, spiritual ministry, and spiritual service. It is also a time to build a life.
Yes.
And don't miss that. In our culture, we so easily give up on things, and we're so easily distracted. We really strongly believe in me time.
We do.
And sometimes me time is of no value at all. It's an entire weekend of binging on Netflix.
Or just scrolling through Instagram.
And it's an easy thing to waste a lot. But this single time is a chance to work hard.
Yes.
It's a chance to save money. And invest money.
Absolutely.
And because if you don't set a budget in your singleness to where you're on purpose, this is what I'm spending, this is what my bills are, this is what I'm saving, you can really spend 5 or 10 years single, and when it's all said and done, be nowhere further down the road financially than you were 10 years ago.
True.
But if you budget it, you can find ways to invest money.
Yes.
Your money can then grow, can compound.
Absolutely.
And you can even buy a house in your singleness. A house is always an investment.
Yes.
And very rarely does a house investment decrease. House investments are a increasing investment. It's an increasing asset, and it always ends up being worth more than what you paid for it if you'll take the time. And typically we don't pay cash for houses. We end up financing those over a process of time. But as that house begins to be paid off, then the house is worth more than we paid for it.
Yes.
And so these are good
And it
good
gives
times.
you something to do as you're fixing up your house or having people over. David had mentioned having people over, and it made me think of a book by Rosaria Butterfield. It is called The Gospel Comes with a House Key. And Mrs. Butterfield talks a lot in that book. Well, she gives her testimony how that she was influenced with the gospel of Christ as a single lady being invited to a meal, and how that she and her family now open their house to a host of people, many of them single, and can just develop friendship with them, relationship with them, but also sharing the gospel. And what an opportunity you could have as a single person opening your house and just to your neighborhood, maybe to coworkers, and investing in them for the gospel.
Absolutely. Romans 12 says this, having gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, whether prophecy, let us prophesy according to the proportion of faith, or ministry, let us wait on our ministering, or he that teacheth on teaching, or he that exhorteth on exhortation. He that giveth, let him do it with simplicity. He that ruleth with diligence. He that showeth mercy with cheerfulness. Let love be without dissimulation. He gives a lot of practical advice in Romans 12, but one of the things he teaches all of us to do is to find our spiritual gift and use it. One of the ways to make your singleness an incredibly valuable time is to use your spiritual gift to the fullness.
Yes.
And it may be that your spiritual gift would be, say, serving or teaching. And so Paul says, if your spiritual gift is serving, then make sure you're you're serving.
Yes.
And he says, if your spiritual gift is teaching, then why aren't you teaching to advance the kingdom? If your spiritual gift is exhortation, then you should be working at exhorting those around you and
Yes.
encourage them. If your spiritual gift is giving, then give generously. Look for projects where you can save money and set it aside and then invest in others, and
Right.
you're giving to them. Or you can lead, he says, with zeal or with diligence. Or if you have, if acts of mercy, then you do all that cheerfully.
Right.
For some reason, it's popular in our culture to exercise our spiritual gift and be bothered about it. Oh, okay, fine, I'll give to that. Or, okay, fine, if nobody else will do it, I'll serve. And oh my word, I'm teaching, but it is so hard.
Right.
You got to think right, or all of this spiritual investment becomes a negative burden.
Absolutely.
And Jesus said very clearly that his yoke is easy and his burden is light.
Yes.
And God doesn't want you in your singleness to be burdened down and frustrated and irritated, either at life or at church or at serving God.
True.
He wants you to invest this time of your life in a happy service to the Lord. And so if you love to sing, get in the choir and sing. If you love to teach, find a way to teach and just do it with all of your heart and be a happy asset in your local church and invest in life and make this a very positive time.
Absolutely.
So what else would you add there to that first question?
I would say, as far as the spiritual gifts, I was thinking of a caution, sometimes maybe more with young ladies. I don't know, with young men, you might be able to speak to that, but sometimes they're asked to do something, maybe an older person in the church or maybe someone on the church staff notices they have an aptitude for something and they say, hey, I think you would be really good at, could you? And we sometimes can have that false humility of, oh, I could never do that. I could never step out of my comfort zone and do that. And so I would caution you, if someone in your church is like, I think you'd be really good at, give it a try. Pray about it and just give it a try. And if you get involved in it and 3 months later, you're like, this really is not working. Let's work to get someone else in here in this position. Or the other caution I have is sometimes in our zeal to want to serve the Lord, we very, very, very badly want to step into a position that the Lord just doesn't have available for us yet. I know I've had young ladies who will say to me, you know what, I just feel like I'm not being used and I have all of these spiritual gifts and they're just not being used because they look at maybe a position in the church that someone else is already fulfilling and they want that position. Well, obviously the Lord doesn't have that for you yet. So just do what he puts in front of you for today. And as you grow and as he gives you opportunity, then you can fulfill what you feel your spiritual gifts are that are not being used.
That's absolutely true. And that's great advice. And I guess what we're really trying to say to you that are single is just to recognize that you are, this is a very valuable time of your life.
It is. And you are valuable to the church.
Yes.
And to your community and to those around you.
Your church needs you. And this is a good time. And I know there's this, this is an awkward time where you're kind of on your own, but there's a different feel because you're not necessarily married. But the fact of the matter is, if you're 25, 26 or into your 30s and still single, then you should be advancing way down the road as a valuable member of the family of God.
Yes.
And that can be in so many ways so valuable to the local church. And so think through what you could do. You are valuable. You are important to God.
Yes.
And it may be that God's plan for your life is that you be single, and that is not at all a second-class position.
Absolutely not.
Single folks in the church are very valuable. And do you have to deal with things that those of us who are married that we don't have to deal with? Yes. On the other hand, those of us who are married, we have to deal with things that you don't have to deal with.
True.
And it's not at all a second-rate thing. And so just be very involved. I think the biggest thing we're trying to tell you that are single, be very involved. You have spiritual gifts, you have spiritual value, and you can be a blessing in the local church if you will serve in the local church. And be early. That's a big one. Be early, meet people, greet people, smile at people. And that's probably good advice, not just for singles, but for all of us.
Oh, for all of us.
So many meetings I observe that we serve the local church. People just come and sit in their seat and talk to their select friends.
Or they get on their phone and they start scrolling.
Yeah, just sit there. We're waiting for church to start. But the Bible does teach us that we are to love one another. We are to bear one another's burdens. We are to pray for one another. We are to care for one another. The one another's are huge in the Bible.
Absolutely.
So this is a real big one.
It is. And all of this was to say that as you are seeking to make your spiritual life strong and your adulting life strong, this will help make those single years very special and add blessing to your life as you're being a blessing to others.
Yeah, and I would add one more thing to it under this first question, because the question is very simple. How do you make singleness something very good? And I would just add to it all the way back to the beginning of our podcast when we taught on serve the Lord with gladness. And I would just say keep a happy heart.
Yes.
Just be friendly, be smiling. Don't let this come a time where you're cynical, where you're frustrated, where life is irritating to you. It's a wonderful thing to be at this stage of your life. So enjoy it. And if you need help, get it. Maybe we could add that to it. If you need help with finances, if you're just not sure how to do a budget,
right.
There's classes available. There's books available. There's counselors available.
Yes.
And if you need some wisdom about your purity, then don't carry that burden alone. Get help, talk, and reach out and make this a valuable time of your life.
Absolutely. Or if you're struggling just with some emotional difficulties or anything, find yourself a Titus 2 lady in your church and get together with her. Ask her over for coffee or ask her if she can go out with you and just talk and listen and learn.
Yes, and do remember Titus 2, because it says that younger ladies are to learn from older and younger men from older.
Yes.
And often we just wish that would happen. We can get frustrated. Well, nobody's teaching. Nobody cares. Sometimes you have to make that happen.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You just have to say, hey, I'd like to go out to coffee with you once a month and just, could you just talk with me about life and about how you succeeded and about the steps I could take. So this is the first question. How do you make singleness something very good? And I think that's a good stopping place.
Yes.
A little shorter today than it has been in the last few weeks, but next week is a big one, and I don't want to start the next question and just talk about it for a few moments.
Right, and then have to pick it up.
Join us next week, because we're going to talk about how do you find a spouse in a world like ours. So that's our second question in Thoughts for Our Single Friends. How do you find a spouse in a world like ours? Look forward to that. Join us next week, and we're excited to talk with you about that one. That is a huge question. Okay, until next week, have a great day.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.